My name is Racheli. I was born in Israel. My parents, actually, my father was in London at some point in his life, but they actually made Aliyah in the 50s from New York. I live in Nofei Elon. I'm a mother of 7. Naftali is my second son. As far as my work, I'm part of the renewal of Talmud Torah by women, and I study and teach Gemara and Halacha in Matan and in Ishmat. He was a teenager and a wonderful, wonderful kid. As teenagers go, you know, he used to fight with his sisters and be amazing in other times, and there was something wholesome about the way he. I'll give you an example. Over the last year, he taught himself to play the guitar. He was very talented at it. You know, it's happened that I'd walk in the street and a car would stop next to me and people would say, Geveret, ben shelach tzadik. You know, the boy is righteous because that's how they found the terror tunnels and da-da-da-da-da. And I'd say, what tzadik? He's a high school kid, you know? And he fights with his sisters. He does. Last year we were supposed to be snowed in. In Israel, it's not serious snow, but a few centimeters of snow and Jerusalem closes and I don't have to go to work. So I spent the night before taking out some things that I was procrastinating on, letters from close friends of Naftali that I know I'll need the day to read and recuperate. And I spent the evening reading his friends' letters and weeping and reading and weeping. So then I went over and I opened his drawer and I moved some stuff and I found an envelope full of money, and I turned it around and it said Maser Ksafim, his tzedakah money for charity from his, I guess, his summer job or whatever. And I started crying again. And then a friend of ours called, and he said, and I told him the whole story, how I opened the drawer and what I found. And he said, you had that coming to you because you said he's not a tzaddik.
שלום, אני רוצה לעדכן על אירוע בשעות האחרונות. עבד הקשר בשעות הלילה המאוחרות עם 3 נערים באזור גוש עציון, ומאז שעות הבוקר אנחנו עסוקים בפעילות מבצעית שמטרתה לחפש אחר האנשים. המשימה העיקרית של כולנו זה לדאוג לשלומם ולהבטיח את הגעתם.
During the search, the days were unbelievably intensive, and there were constantly amazing people coming to our home, bringing a piece of their heart. And it could be a farmer, you know, from a left-wing kibbutz in the south, or a Haredi man from Yerushalayim or Bet Shemesh, or soldiers bring letters for Naftali and giving their beret, the kumta, as a signal of sympathy, and when Naftali comes home, give this to him. I remember the anxiety all concentrating in a certain spot in my body, but other than that, we were very much in focus. Looking back at it, I did, you know, lose over 8 kilograms over 3 weeks and not sleep for, the first night we slept well was the night after the funeral. And they said, you know, we analyzed all the information. We know that there were shots, and we know that there are actual preparations to hold hostages, and maybe they just shot those shots to scare them, and maybe they were wounded, and maybe they killed 2 and saved 1, kept 1 as a hostage, and maybe they're dead. And we're working under the work assumption that we're looking for live people. I believe that if not for that work assumption, we might have never gotten them back home. And, you know, at the time they said that people would say, oh, there's nothing worse than uncertainty. And I'd say, well, you know, if he's going to walk into here healthy or alive, I'm willing to wait 5 years, uncertain. But now that we know that it was over within minutes, it's a few months ago. This summer, the IDF took us to the place where the boys were found, and we were standing there, and we were looking at the unbelievable amount of rocks and caves and underland holes, and you know the expression we won't leave any stone unturned. There were millions of stones there, and this is after the intelligence, narrowed down the area where we should search, and it suddenly hit me the extent of how much this is getting them back took divine grace for me, and unbelievable mesirut nefesh, devotion by everybody involved, the soldiers, the civilians that were searching with them, the soldiers' mothers. I think never in Israeli history did a mother tell her soldier, "Don't come home without the boys." We were on the way to a meeting in Tel Aviv, and we got a phone call to come back home. And the minute the phone call came in, my stomach was up here, because I said this can't be good. If they'd have good news, they would tell us. We returned home, and we were waiting for, Israel is very practiced in breaking bad news. That time where I had a distinct feeling that this is not going well, and we're just waiting to get the message, is in my body like a painful memory, like a physically painful memory. We choose to try to live the full extent, and to experience the blessing at least as much as we experience the loss. I don't need anybody to remind me. There definitely there isn't a flow day that this is not part of my consciousness. I don't know if there's an hour that it's not part of what I think. We're living, and Naftali lives with us. And sometimes we find ourselves weeping, and that's fine. And we open the doors wide for joy in our life too. It took maybe 24 hours for us to understand the magnitude of the story within the state of Israel, and another 24 hours to understand that it's not, it's not even the private story of the state of Israel, and to what extent Jews around the world were caring and opening their heart and praying and being involved and losing sleep over this. You can't take any of that for granted. The truth is, it's truly, truly unbelievable. And I'm in awe of that. There was a time we left the country for 3 or 4 days, I think maybe 8 months after this happened. And we were on the line with a bunch of passports, and there was this lady and the booth where, they have to keep their faces straight and not show that they recognize anybody. And she had a terrible, terrible cold. And as we were coming closer, I saw there were tears coming down her cheeks. And I said, "You don't really have a cold, do you?" And she said, "I'm sorry, I apologize. It's just you lived inside our house throughout that summer." And then we got to where we were headed, and 3 different Jews of different walks of the Jewish life told me the exact same sentence. "You lived inside our house throughout that summer." What could you say? It's truly beyond words. I remember at the time we were very focused in what could we do to save our son at the time. We were trying to figure out what is our role in this intensive, whatever it was, a campaign. And I remember thinking that I can always fall apart later. Now, after staying focused, we'll have time to fall apart later. Also, we had unbelievable support from family, neighbors, community around, citizens from all over the state of Israel, Jews from all over the world. So I wish for anybody in their more difficult times, and inevitably difficult times do come. It doesn't have to be as dramatic as ours. Just to, if they can have some of the support that we had, that would be unbelievable. There was a point in the search where we were given the opportunity to hear the phone call that Gilad made to the police. And we chose if we want to hear it or not. I chose to listen, but in preparation, I approached one of the IDF people that were actually living with us at the time. If you can prepare me to hearing the tape. He didn't know what we're going to hear. I didn't know what we're going to hear. And he said, Racheli, what are you afraid of? And I said, I don't know. Maybe I'll fall apart. And he said, okay, so you'll fall apart. Then what? So I thought for a second, and I said, well, I guess then I'll collect myself and get up. And he said, that's straight. And those were such simple words, but for me they were profound. And later, 3 months later, we got a phone call from the mother of Bnaya Rein, Chagit Rein, a wonderful lady who lost her son in Lebanon a few years ago. And she called in the week of Rosh Hashanah, and she said, I'm just calling to tell you that the anxiety you're feeling now about being Rosh Hashanah without him and Sukkot without him, the fear that you're feeling now, it's worse than the holiday itself. And I heard her and I understood, and it helped me. And today, I put these two stories together, and I say, nobody should be in the surreal drama we were in. But we all have the things that we fear. And sometimes the fear is worse than the thing itself. And sometimes if, God forbid, the worst thing happens, and even if, Khalila, we fall apart, we have it within us. Prayer became more real to me, not because, it's the way to get results, but it's the way to have dialogue. I never related to prayer as some kind of cash machine. You put Tehillim one way and you get the results the other. It's more about standing before my Creator and communicating. If I'm in pain, I scream. If I have what to thank, I thank. And usually it's both. Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't owe me anything. And I feel I am and was bestowed with so much grace. The hardest thing was breaking the news to my children. Taking each one of them, and they walk in and they're like a blossoming flower, and you feel like you're going to step on them. So that was very difficult. I know someone that met Natan Sharansky the day after the Levaya of our boys. And Natan said, you know how people say that in Ma'amad Har Sinai, in Sinai, everybody, all the souls were there, even the ones that weren't, etc. That's how I felt yesterday in the funeral. Rav Dov Zinger, he's the headmaster of the Rosh Yeshiva of Gilad and Naftali's school. In the eulogy, he said, people say where there are two Jews, there are three opinions. But I want to tell you, where there are two Jews, there are three opinions, but one heart. And when I think of it, I think that the three opinions are just as essential as the one heart. It's who we are. We come from a culture of a Bet Midrash. Machloket is part of who we are, and having a heartly argument and deep disagreements and variations. It's who we are as the Jewish people. But it's all different when you experience it on the basis of realizing that there's one heart, of really keeping the sense of family. Turning to someone on the right and on the left that, looks different and dresses different and probably has different dreams for the Jewish people. And still saying, you're my brother, you're my sister. I'll argue it all the way, but we're there together. And you know, when we took our first steps in getting to know our renewed life, you know, sometimes you need to just breathe. And then you sometimes feel like a toddler learning to walk again. And then you become a little bit busy with, so what's the meaning of all of this, and what are we going to do with it? And we felt like we must keep what we can of the spirit of that summer. We founded the Jerusalem Unity Prize that comes to give recognition and promote people that are doing wonderful work to connect different parts of Am Yisrael. It was the first Unity Day. All over schools and military and youth movements all over Israel and in dozens of communities around the world. Communities were not only commemorating but actually doing deeds of unity. I find that very exciting, and this year it's growing, and many more communities around the world and in Israel are putting Unity Day as part of their calendar and deciding they're not going to let this just go by. They're going to do something about it. You know, over this last year and a half, I've met many Jews from the diaspora, and over I hear people saying, you know, a miracle happened to us. And I say, what's the miracle? And they say, at the time we stood Hasidic, Haredi, ultra-Orthodox Jews next to modern Orthodox, next to Reform, next to conservative, next to so-called non-affiliated Jews. And first we all prayed together and rallied together, and then we all got together again for a memorial. And I think what we're saying is, let's not wait for such sad times. Let's find the places to interact, to connect, to love. Yom Hazikaron is part of the package, and it's something you grow up on here, and you always find the place in your heart that's with the families that are, you know, in the story, but it's always your story. It's not a day where you identify with someone else. That's the way I always felt growing up here, that it's part of our story. I'm sure it's funny, I can keep on speaking about it as if it's somebody else's story. Yes, there is a different angle when you're into it, but that's an interesting question. How does someone that is now deep inside the story relate to Yom Hazikaron? When suddenly you find yourself as that family, one of those many families, that's when you stop and you ask yourself, so what does Yom Hazikaron mean to me? Because in a way every day is Yom Hazikaron, and it sounds like a cliche, but it never leaves you. And then you have other days. You have the day that it happened, and you have the day you have your son's birthday, and you have there are a million. Your calendar is full of such little, you don't need reminders, but little memorial days. So sometimes I find myself thinking about, Jews like you in Manchester. What does Yom Hazikaron mean to you? And it's interesting because as far as I'm concerned, you're part of the story. Our life here in Israel has everything to do with you. And I know there's a lot of connection and sympathy and solidarity. We usually feel it in the worst of times. So we're in this together. Being Jews, being proud Jews, being part of the story of the State of Israel.